Hey everybody, Johnny here, and today I'm talking about Monster Hunter Wilds. I got a chance to play the game for about 20-30 hours and had a blast with it. But of course, there are some things you should be aware of to make sure you're going into the right experience for you, or maybe stay away from it if it's not for you. So I'll try to give you some really good indications as to whether or not you might like it, some of the things I really enjoyed about it, and some of the issues that I had. And we're going to structure this in this way. I'm going to give you the TLDR, or some of the general things about the game you should know. And then we're going to get into more detail, and I'll break out some of the more nuanced things that I picked up on. And so if you just want the short and sweet, I'll give it to you right now, and then we'll kind of get into more depth. So the first thing you should know is it's a fairly short campaign. So you're looking at, 15, 17 hours for the main story. And it might depend on, if you die a lot or not. But if you've already played Monster Hunter games, chances are you're going to do really, really well in this game. It's actually quite a lot easier than other games in my experience. I could also be biased because Monster Hunter World was my first Monster Hunter game, and I spent over 300 hours playing that. I absolutely loved it. And so that game was much harder for me as I was learning all about the weapons and how the gameplay works. Going into this one, already knowing how to handle a few weapons, I had a pretty easy time getting through it and really just didn't die much at all. And so you might feel like it's a bit too easy if you're a veteran in the games. On the flip side, if you're new to Monster Hunter, this is a great game to jump in. It's pretty accessible. It's got some improved quality of life, but nothing that I will say after this should change your mind if you're already not a fan of Monster Hunter games. The game is very similar to other Monster Hunter games. It's the same formula. It's improved in some areas. It's got some new stuff, but overall, you should expect a very similar experience. But if you've never tried a Monster Hunter game, this is actually a really good one to jump in because it's actually quite accessible, like I said. So that's the long made short. And now let's get into a little bit more detail and talk a little bit about the things that I picked up as I spent a bunch of time playing this week. And by the way, big thanks to the developer. Thanks to them for providing a code so that I could play this early and really spend a lot of quality time in the game before I talk to you guys about it. And also thanks to ACG for making that connection possible too. And you guys should look out for his review because I'm sure it's going to be much more exhaustive and complete here. But with that out of the way, let's jump into the details. All right, so I'm going to speed run a few things about the game that I thought might change your mind one way or another. The first thing is tutorials still suck, pretty much. They're very similar. You get a pop-up about one thing, but it's very hard for you to actually put that into practice. And a lot of things you will either need to seek guidance from YouTube, quite frankly, or friends. But that's always been the way. It's just sad that it hasn't improved that much. What has improved is the fact that you can carry two weapons out in the hunt and you can seamless swap between them in your mount. So that's awesome, and it opens up a whole bunch of things you can do, like having a backup weapon that works in cases where your main weapon doesn't. For example, I use greatsword. It's awesome to have the dual blades in cases where it's hard to land my big blows from the greatsword. The mount also has auto driving, so it will actually just drive to, I say drive, but I mean ride to the target or waypoint. And that works pretty well overall so that you can actually focus on other things like your item bar or looking around, picking up stuff. With the mount is also great because you have a grapple. So as you ride, you're able to, boom, grapple onto things and pick them up. I will say, though, it's a bit sad that there isn't more innovation in some of these systems. Like I talked about tutorials, the same goes for inventory. Hasn't really changed, and honestly, it's not great, right? Inventory management kind of sucks. The menus are very convoluted and kind of suck. And even things like upgrading your weapon goes through a really inscrutable UI that you have to parse where things don't quite make sense. even after playing many, many hours, you're still trying to make sense of it all. And sadly, that has not improved. Also, some of these older menus like customize bowgun and your insects and stuff like that, that are menus to a specific weapon, have not been integrated into a central menu for managing all weapons. And that's something I really wanted to see, a streamlining of all of these legacy systems. Sadly, not there. And yeah, just the descriptions in menu are also difficult for different armor parts, and just making sense of it all is a bit tricky. Also, they added a recommended armor or weapon option. It kind of doesn't work overall. It will suggest some really bad options and things. So I just wouldn't trust that at all. And look into what you should build for yourself, because the recommendations currently are not very good. But yeah, you're still pretty much on your own when it comes to learning new weapons. The training facility is a bit easier to get to, but you still have to get in there, try a bunch of things, look up for more information, and figure things out from there. I will say a lot of small things have been improved, like the sounds are actually much improved for pickups, for attacks, and overall, I felt much more identifiable things that I could pick up from the sound. So that's awesome. And you also have new things like pop-up camps, where you can get these camps on different locations in the areas, opening up navigation options where you can fast travel to these and cut some of the traveling down by a great margin. There's a danger level to where you place the camps. So, you know, if there's a monster close to them, they might take down the camp, and then you have to go and repair it. I will say also some HUD elements are pretty annoying, like tips and things like that. You can turn off a lot of them, which is great. But if you're playing with the default HUD, be aware it's going to be pretty intrusive, and some stuff will just stay there and not go, like tips on how to do a certain thing for certain missions. So highly recommend get in there, dial in your HUD options. And personally, I turn down a lot of the HUD stuff, or turn off or reduce it. So great to have those options. And really, that ties into the quality of life. This game introduces a lot of quality of life improvements based on the other games. So stuff like the two weapons, stuff like an autofocus mode where you can actually change where you're aiming your hit. These are massive changes and completely change the way you play actually in practice. So for example, as a greatsword user, I am charging a very big attack, and if the target moves even a little bit, I would often miss it. And World introduced a slingshot mechanic where you could readjust your direction, but it was quite clunky in my opinion and not that easy to execute. Now you have autofocus that allows you to do it for every attack, and actually works really, really well to aim wounds and different weak parts. Great stuff. Some new attacks as well that help you exploit those kind of weak parts or broken parts. And overall, the whole thing flowed way better. I think this is why the game overall feels a lot easier too. And I think these two things are very well connected. The fact that you have all this quality of life and the combat feels less clunky also actually makes the game easier. And I wonder how much of the difficulty from the prior games are linked to some of these things being pretty clunky and hard to play around. And so on one hand, I'm really happy, you know, the quality of life makes this a lot easier to play, a lot nicer to play, but also kind of makes it easier too, which is not necessarily a bad thing. I did find, however, that the game is on the easier side. And this is something I do want to bring up because the campaign is quite short. You're looking at 15, 17 hours. And if you buy this game only for the campaign, that to me is a bit on the short side. And like I said, I felt it was pretty easy too. So it might not leave a big mark on you. With that said, once you beat the campaign, of course, you have post-campaign stuff. And that for a lot of people, that's the big part of the game they want to get into, where you unlock high rank and master rank and different stuff like that. And you get stronger versions of the same monsters. But yeah, overall, I had a blast with this. The new monsters are awesome. Some of them, again, are fairly easy. And I will warn you about that. But overall, I think this is a great game and a great first Monster Hunter game for a lot of people. On the performance side, I did have some difficulty getting a locked 60 FPS on a 3090 at 4K, so I did turn down the resolution to 1440p, and there I actually got a locked 60 and the game ran pretty well overall. I didn't have any crashes or any weird things like that. I just had some frame drops in certain areas, but it really wasn't consistent enough to give me too much trouble. So yeah, overall, on the technical side, things went great. When it comes to co-op, the testing that I did was quite cumbersome to even get into co-op with my friend Carrick. And yeah, we just struggled to figure out the menus and how to actually get into it. Once we got into the session itself and the quest, things worked pretty well. I didn't have any connection issues, so hopefully that will work, just flawlessly once people figure out the best ways to connect to each other and everything. And this is crossplay, so doesn't matter where you play it, you'll be able to play with your friends, which is awesome. It also looks like you can play any mission, even if the other person hasn't done it yet. So that should mean you could do the story together if you wanted to, although I haven't been able to test that myself. But that's going to do it for my thoughts. I hope you guys enjoyed this little sort of speed run talking about the game here and my impressions. Again, super grateful and honored to have been a part of the review process with ACG, and big thanks to the developer for providing the code. I will look forward to the next video and seeing you guys on the channel again. Take care, everybody.